Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm out here on the West Coast in sunny Los Angeles, California. John is in New York. What's the weather like in New York, John McAteer?
Yeah, the weather's not terrible. It was weird. We were in like this weird kind of fall, but it was like a fall in Seattle for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden it became summer on Friday. So it's warm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're really excited about all the participants who've registered and those who've been engaged and involved. It's so important. Everything that PAVE is doing in this conference is educational, insightful, and we're hoping that you will have takeaways to share with other parents, families, and students. My name is Soraya Fidel, and I am a proud parent of a senior. While you guys are coming in, telling you a little bit about me. So we're in that senior crazed mode of so many events, so many things happening, and then graduation. She's UCLA bound, my daughter is. So I'm very proud of that. I'm also a PTSA executive board member, executive vice president, and a community and parent rep at our school, and just involved in the community. I have my hands dabbled in a lot of things. And I know John's a very proud dad as well.
I am. I usually introduce myself, professionally, and I'm a dad. But in this context, yes, I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter, who I will reference many times during this this presentation. And I'm also the coordinator of the young adult treatment program at the New York Center for Living, which is an outpatient mental health and substance abuse program.
Awesome, awesome. So I think we're still waiting for a couple folks to join in. John, you can give me the thumbs up when you feel like we are ready to go. We'll
Okay.
start with some folks, and
Mhm.
then we'll address the rules of engagement or what we
Right
call
on.
Zoom norms.
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
So we hope you've enjoyed the sessions so far. The agendas have looked very, very insightful, very exciting to see what's been discussed so far. I think we have.
And this is also being simulcast in Spanish as well, which is fantastic.
Yes. So we have the bilingual option, and it's being recorded.
Hmm.
So that'll be available for school communities or other organizations that might want to use it for purposes of educating others. Really,
Yeah, yeah. And I will say that this topic in particular is definitely really, really important, right? Because a lot of parents don't necessarily know, you know, what's the best way, right? So like, what is the best way to address this, right? And it needs to be addressed. It can't be ignored. We know that. um the how is so important, right? um and so we'll definitely get into the how.
all right. So we can go ahead and dive in. We people can chime in as we go. So again, my name is Soraya Duran. I'm a proud parent here in Los Angeles, California. Also very involved with the PAVE organization. So thank you for joining. This will be an engaging, interactive session where John and I will do a couple of informative and role playing, and then also if there's time, hopefully we can have questions in the Q&A that we'd be more than happy to answer. We'll be mindful of the time. Again, it's one of those sessions where be open to learning, right, and passing that information on. John is, as he said, the coordinator of the Young Adult Services at the New York Center for Living. His current position is enhanced by his prior experience as both an adjunct professor as well as the director of training and evaluation at the Institute for Adolescent Trauma Treatment and training at Adelphi University School of Social Work. He is certified in structured psychotherapy for adolescents responding to chronic stress and is an OASAS certified trainer in screening, brief intervention, and referral treatment. He's a busy man. Formerly on staff at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, he has provided evidence based training for substance abuse and mental health throughout the 5 boroughs. He is a frequent guest speaker on the issues concerning the vaping epidemic. He has his MS in social work from Columbia University and his BA from Adelphi University. So, John, take it away.
Cool. All right, excellent. Well, once again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much to PAVE. This is a wonderful, wonderful organization, and I'm so happy to be able to participate in it, because our goals are really the same in regards to the work that I do with my clients. Whereas in most of my work experience, I've worked directly with the clients, whether they be adolescent, young adult, or adult. Where I work now at the New York Center for Living, a lot of my work centers around work with families and parents. And I definitely identify with the feeling of powerlessness in regards to the correct way to, or an effective way to communicate with my children about this. So I am going to start by sharing my screen. I'm going to start by attempting to share my screen. Okay. All right. So we should all be able to see this.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. All right. So this is basically what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about a lot of what's called motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is and I would say it's an evidence-based practice that's really devoted to helping to conjure up and cultivate motivation in clients where change is difficult. And it's, and it definitely has applicability in regards to a parent, working with their child around whatever behavior change they're looking for. Here, we're going to be talking about it within the context of vaping and vaping behavior. So we're going to go into some of the tenets of motivational interviewing, some of the skills of motivational interviewing, and we're going to be then Soraya and myself are going to be doing a bit of a role play. We're going to be putting on our actors hats and working through a scenario where we highlight those skills that we went through. So hopefully this will definitely have some really concrete takeaways. I talked about the New York Center for Living before. We are exclusively dedicated to treating adolescents, young adults, and families, which is great, because a lot of the treatment centers that we've worked with really focus on the client. And when we're talking with an adolescent or a young adult, you'd be missing a lot of pieces if we didn't address the family as well. So that's why our focus is on the family. So here we're going to start off with some polls.
These are anonymous, by the way. You can read the question and just answer, and then we'll share the results, kind of gauge where everyone's at with this. All right, so we were able to see that. Could you share that, John? It's shared, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Great. And so here's the next question. Okay. So 58% say yes,
Yeah,
42% say no.
that's great. And this was really, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I think it was Soraya, it was your idea to have these polls in the beginning to sort of gauge where everyone's at. And if I could have reworded the first the first question a little bit better, because I think that we could be angry and confrontative while addressing it appropriate. I think that we have to honor both those experiences as parents, and it's very important, right? Because yeah, I mean, very often we are angry, we are upset, and we want to kind of jump to the intervention and jump to taking care of business or fixing the problem or whatever it is. then we pause and we think, okay, well, what is the best way to kind of go about this? And when I say the best way, our focus needs to be, what is the result? What do I want to see from this interaction, right? Because it can't just be, I want to get my point across, right? It needs to be, I want to have my child hear me. I want them to buy into it. And I want to be able to be a partner with them in motivating for a behavior change.
We talked about that. John and I had a discussion about this as parents, how to not catastrophize or react, right? That impulsivity of just like, what? And so, how do you control those emotions and kind of do the breathing and count to 10 and strategically think about how you're going to navigate through this uncharted territory?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thanks for
Yep.
that.
And there's been a couple of times where my wife says, I thought you said you were a therapist, in regards to some of the reactions that I've had. And so I've had to check myself. But as we go along, I'll tell you an interesting story that happened 2 Fridays ago with my 14-year-old daughter that is definitely related to this. So let's see. So I guess I can just kind of move forward with this, or
Yeah.
okay. All right. So I mentioned motivational interviewing before, right? And it's really defined as, and the creators of it were Miller and Rolnick. They have their 3rd edition of motivational interviewing book out now. It's really a collaborative conversational style. All right. And the goal is to exclusively, like I said, cultivate someone's commitment to change, increase their motivation to change. The answers to all the questions lie within the person I'm talking to. I need to be creative and engaging to get those out and to have them directed in a certain way, right? So what motivational interviewing is not, and this is very important, it's not just being nice, right? Those of us that are, and I'll include myself in this, that like to be buddy with our kids in hopes that will garner some sort of alliance, right? But at the end of the day, we're still parents, and so they will still kind of view us in that way, right? So it's not just being nice, right? No boundaries, do whatever you want or whatever. We find that the children that we work with actually thrive better with boundaries and clear boundaries, right? It's not a solution to all our problems. It's also, it's not a way to manipulate people, but it is subtly manipulative, right? The term that we use in motivational interviewing is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. What motivational interviewing does is makes the oats really salty. So this way the horse wants to drink, right? So that's sort of the perspective from which we're coming from, right? And, to really create a good context for this, we want to know, how do I know if my child is vaping? Like, what are the signs? What are the symptoms, right? Because I will tell you that vape, and this, vape is, I think I described it yesterday because my clients had questions about it, is the most, it's so far the perfect delivery system for nicotine that's out there. And when I say perfect, it's clean, it's non-combustible, and it also can be anonymous, right? You don't know, right? And that's I think what the user really enjoys about it, is that they don't, that they can vape in class and no one would know. They can vape in the bathroom and no one would know. They can vape in the home and no one would know. So it's important that we look at, has there been sort of increased secrecy from my child? Has there been a change in their mood, right? As we know, introduction of nicotine is a stimulant. So we can look for irritability, or we can look for anger, or maybe some impulsivity, right? Or we can look at the crash that comes after the nicotine, where we're talking about a very low mood, very low energy, things like that. If there's money missing, right? Because invariably, although there is a lot of, I mean, I'm speaking for New York right now, there is a lot of access for adolescents to get their hands on vape, although they still cost money. So it's important that, you keep an eye on that. Increased thirst, right? When I vape, it goes in through my mouth and it goes, into my lungs, and the oil will dry out my mouth. So there might be increased thirst. If you have kids that normally drink caffeine that are less likely to drink caffeine, it's because they might be getting that boost from the nicotine, right? Nosebleeds, because again, it's drying out your mucosa membranes in there. If you hear the term juuling, that is a term that means engaging in a specific brand of vape, right? And we can look at vaping illness, right? Are they having breathing or digestive problems? Right? Some people have been hospitalized for vape-related illnesses, right? Difficulty breathing, chest tightness, nausea, vomiting, things like that. Because, as you've probably found out already, or already, it's really, no one is really sure what additives can be in the oil that our children might be vaping. The spirit of motivational interviewing, and this kind of highlights what we were talking about before, we want to do everything in collaboration, right? So it's not like I'm the parent and this is the child, but we're really kind of doing this together, right? There needs to be a certain amount of acceptance, right? So that, and when I say acceptance, I'm talking about a lack of judgment, right? Compassion, right, is really kind of understanding that what they're struggling with is difficult. This is not easy stuff. And evocation, what I mean by evocation is essentially what I said before, the answer lies inside them. We want to pull that out and really cultivate what's important to them, find out what's important to them. And that will kind of come across in the role play, right? The spirit of motivational interviewing, right? Like I said, we want to communicate that compassion, acceptance, partnership, right? And respect, right? It's highly collaborative. We want to evoke all of the information that we can from our child, and really emphasize that they are autonomous, right? I know this says client and not child because we usually use this in referencing clients, but it's really kind of honoring the autonomy of our children to be able to make choices, and we want to guide them effectively in making healthy choices, and of course having compassion, right? That this is not a difficult time for any of our kids, and I'm saying COVID aside, right? Just going through normal development is extremely, extremely challenging, right? It's also important, right? So motivational interviewing is great. We need to also understand the context of where someone is in regards to their stage of change, also known as the trans-theoretical model of change. Essentially, so by two, I think, psychologists, Prochaska and De Clemente, they found out through research on nicotine addiction and cigarette smoking that really people only stop any kind of unhealthy behavior when they're ready, right? Does that sound right? Does anyone identify with that? I mean, I do, right? My wife has been trying to get me to go to the gym for months now. And I could say that I effectively donate to my local gym, right? I send them a payment every, that's my philanthropic sort of activity. But I'm only going to go when I'm ready, right? And the trans-theoretical model really focuses on the decision-making of the individual as that model for the intention to change, right? No one ever changes behavior easily. We need to go through a cycle, right? So essentially the stages of change go from pre-contemplation, right? Pre-contemplation is there's no intention on changing because there's no problem. What problem? Everything's fine, right? And then we go into contemplation. Okay, well, maybe there's an issue. Maybe I should do something about it, but I'm just not quite ready yet. And it's important that we know that we can spend forever in contemplation. I could, in regards to going to the gym, I could spend eternity in contemplation, right? Then there's preparation. Okay, I realize there's an issue. I want to do something about it. I'm going to start looking at resources. I'm going to start gathering resources and make sure that I have all of the information I possibly can get in order to kind of move forward. And then we actually have action, right? Where we are seeking to put that plan into place. And then we have maintenance, right? Where we're keeping that goal going for a certain, for 6 months or more, let's say, right? There's always relapse, like a fallback to previous behavior, but the hope is that we're able to kind of look at our resources and see how we could improve. So when we're talking about the interventions, right, it's very important that we know as parents, we are the primary prevention tool for our kids when it comes to vape, nicotine addiction, any kind of addiction, or any kind of process addiction as well, right? So it's very important that we start with that open and non-judgmental communication, really fostering the safe space for our children to come to us, to know that they're going to be okay, and that telling us and being open and honest with us is okay. I learned through being a father that I've essentially taught my kids how to lie. Right? You would say, well, how have I done that? There's cookies missing from the cookie jar, right? If I get angry with my kid, did you steal the cookies? Of course they're going to lie, right? But if I approach it and be like, it's interesting, I could have sworn there were more cookies in the cookie jar. Did you have more cookies? If I approach it differently, they are more likely to engage. They're more likely to be honest with me, right? Psychosocially, right, from the ages of 6 to 12, our children are really still mostly influenced by us, by the parents, and they're starting to get influenced by their peer group, but really we hold the monopoly on sort of their influence, right? So in regards to prevention, and if you hearken back to that stage of change, we're talking about pre-contemplation. If we are looking to address someone or address our child that's in pre-contemplation, education is the best way to go, right? Providing them that information, letting them know ahead of time, look, this is what to expect, and this is what vaping is about, right? When we're talking about prevention for 13 to 19-year-olds, right, sort of that high adolescent stage, right? Again, we want to have already set the stage with that open and non-judgmental communication, right? But now they're starting to get more influenced by their peer group, right? So I always say that the older my daughters get, the more embarrassing I seem to get. So I'm picking up my daughter from parties like down the block now. I'm not actually picking her up in front of the house, things like that. So, their peer group really carries a lot more weight, right? And education regarding vaping, right? If you're fairly certain that they haven't engaged in it, right? So that education is so important. A great way that I have found to bring up the conversation is ask about their friends, ask about their friend group, right? How do they deal with stress? What do you guys do when you hang out, right? Yeah, I'll get into the story with my daughter in a bit. And I actually, in the role play that we'll get to, I want to let you know that I actually worked with both my daughters on that role play, and they said, "No, Dad, don't say this, say this." And so, really talking to our children about, listen, if you were hanging out with your friends and one of them, pulled out a vape, what would you do? How would you manage that, right? And really kind of addressing it from an open and non-judgmental way, and helping them sort of brainstorm, right? This is what they want to have happen. So these are the behaviors that I need to engage in order to get to that goal, right? So if we are talking about that adolescent or even young adult that is actively vaping, and we want to do something about it, right? So again, preparing with that base of non-judgmental communication. We know they're highly influenced by their peers, and we want to provide that education. We need to be able to address the issue. We need to be able to bring up that conversation. We want to talk about the facts. We want to, express our concern. And like I said before, it's really making sure that they know that this is a collaborative enterprise, that we can only do this together, right? Those days of clean your room. Okay, Daddy, I go clean my room. That we don't see that anymore. This needs to, I need to garner motivation from my child. And probably the most important thing, and this is really where we're going to go with this, some of the skills that we talk about in motivational interviewing, right? Because we talked about evocation. I need to get this information out of my child. We use open-ended questions, we use affirmations, we use reflections, and we use summary, right? And if you think about it, OARS is the acronym. And OR is, and I only recently put this together, is that the OR, in a boat, not only helps direct where they're going, but it also propels. So it's moving them, and it's also directing them, right? And it's a very, very subtle skill that we'll kind of get into, right? So when I'm asking open-ended questions, right, it's very important because it really gets someone talking about what's important to them and understanding another person's perspective, right? So if I ask, and just to let you know the difference, what's the difference between an open-ended question, closed-ended question, right? I remember back when my daughter was in camp, and I would get home from work right around the time that, like, she's already had her dinner, right? She spent from 7:30 to 4:30 in camp. She's exhausted. She's had dinner, had her shower, and now I come home during television time and I want to know all about her day, right? So I'm like, "Did you have fun today?" And she goes, "Yeah." "Did you do fun things?" "Yeah." Those are examples of close-ended questions, right? And then, and just to let you know, she's giving me zero eye contact at this point, right? She's just focused on the TV. And then I asked her, "Can you tell me one thing that made you laugh today?" Right? Or something that you found funny. And immediately her eye contact starts to break, and she's now focused on me. I have her attention, and she was able to tell me the story about how her friend, drank milk and laughed and it came out her nose or whatever, but really those open-ended questions really help them to express themselves. Affirmations, right? It's very important that we affirm every time we notice that our child is taking a step towards increased communication, is that we really validate that and we really kind of help focus on their strengths, right? Reflections are simply saying back either the same words or the same theme to our children that they're saying to us, right? And there's some subtleties there. So reflections show that I'm listening, right? And it also can be used for clarification, right? So when my daughter comes home, right, and she goes, "Oh, what a terrible day." I was just like, "Yeah, that English test was rough." And she says, "No, my friends ignored me all day." So just by me reflecting and getting it wrong, right? It wasn't about the English test. It was about her friends. She then was able to talk about her friends. It leaves it open like that. And summary is very important because it really collects all the tidbits of the conversation that I really want to highlight. And that becomes sort of like the plan or the next steps. There are always traps, right? As parents, there's always communication traps that we can fall into. The expert trap, right? I know more than you do, so you need to listen to me. I've already lost them, right? They've kind of shut off, right? The premature focus trap. I might first, have a really good conversation, open conversation with my child, and then I realize they'll be like, "Aha, I know that this is the issue," and then I go right for it, but they're not ready to go talk about that main issue, so then they shut down. The labeling trap. "Oh, well, you're just this, or you're just that, or you're just lazy, or you're just unmotivated, or whatever." That label will shut our kids down. The blaming trap. This is perfect. Right? So, well, if Johnny wouldn't hang out with Kevin, this wouldn't happen. Kevin's a bad influence, right? So it's Kevin's fault, which then takes all of the onus or power to change the behavior off of your child. So it's important not to play the blame game, right? The question and answer trap is simply kind of getting into that yes, no sort of question and answer that we can get to in regards to conversation with our kids. Will you hang out with them? Yes. Did you drink? No. Right. So just, we have to avoid that. And also confrontation, right? Like I said with the cookie example before, it's important that we can confront, but as long as it's done in a way that really promotes our engagement, then it's all good. The writing reflex, we could know immediately how our kids can fix the problems that they're struggling with, right? But it's important that we just don't go in with that, right? Because if they're not ready to hear it, then we end up arguing for change, and that ends up with us being on different pages, right? We've already kind of lost that battle in that regard. So we have to kind of subdue our reflex to fix a problem, right? And it's very important that before we address vaping behavior or any kind of substance use behavior with our children, we need to know how we feel about it. We need to really, really be upfront with ourselves in regards to, well, my dad was an alcoholic, or my mom used to smoke, right? So I have very strong feelings about that. And that might come through in my interaction with my child. So it's important that I know that, right? So this way it doesn't come across through an angry or impatient or confrontation, right? So it's really getting ourselves in check first, right? To know how we feel about it before addressing it, right? So it does take some preparation. So what we have here now is we're going to be doing a role play with between Soraya and myself, where Soraya is lucky; she gets to be the client, and I get to be I don't know, whatever I am, the parent.
It's a caregiver, yeah, and I'm the child or teen.
Right, exactly. So, and what we anticipate doing is doing this role play, and then just kind of stopping at various points to kind of highlight, what's going on. So are you good, Soraya?
I'm good to go.
Amazing. Hey, Soraya, can I speak to you for a minute?
Sure.
All right. Listen, now I wanted to talk to you. I know we've talked about this before, but I just wanted to kind of address it again. We've talked about vaping before, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk with you a bit more about this because I got to tell you, I'm a little concerned.
About what?
I like I said, we spoke about this before. Listen, you are, let's say, 16 years old, and you're spending less time with us and more time with your friends, which is awesome. I love your friends, and I love seeing how happy you are when you're with your friends.
Yeah.
And I know that we've also spoke about, how important it is that we are able to trust one another and really be honest with each other about what's going on.
Yes, I remember.
Okay. So time out for a second. So one of the traps here is, right. So I am, the context is I'm aware that my child has had vaping paraphernalia in their room that I found. Right. So I could have gone in and just confronted them, be like, what the hell? I found this in your room. Explain this. Right. And it wouldn't have been as engaging. So it's important that, I kind of set the tone. And you can see how interested Soraya is in this conversation so far. Uh,
Correct.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. Did you have more, Soraya?
No, I was definitely agreeing with you on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Um, well, great. So, like I said, I'm a little concerned. We've talked a lot about, what your friends do for fun and what they do to relax. And we know, and I know that your friends vape around you and that you've had a lot of difficulty not vaping with them. Um, can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to have them vape around you and you not engage? Okay, and just stop for a second. So can you say a little bit more about what it's like to have them vape in front of you? That is an example of an open-ended question, right? The goal of which is to really bring out as much information as I possibly can from Soraya.
The response from the child would be, well, what do you want me to say? I'm like the only kid whose parents are so controlling. All my friends get to vape. I mean, what's the big deal? I'm the only one who's not allowed. It sucks.
I know. It sounds like super hard, and I have to believe that you feel really left out, in those experiences, right? So in that moment, I'm expressing empathy, right? I'm looking to really, sort of validate the experience that my child might be going through. Do you remember what we spoke about, Soraya, in regards to some of the impact that vaping has on how we feel?
Yes. God, yes.
Well, I know that lacrosse is very important to you. Do you think that there would be any impact on, your performance in lacrosse?
Well, I know it wouldn't help, that's for sure. And it would definitely hold me back. I told you about Marcus, and how
Mhm.
he tried to quit, but he had to quit. I mean, he kept losing his breath during games. He was vaping.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally, totally. Yeah, and I know you felt really bad for Marcus that he had to stop, right? Well, essentially exactly what happened to Marcus. I don't want that happening to you. I want you to be okay and I want you to be healthy. But most of all, I want you to feel good, hanging around your friends and not feel as though you are somehow left out.
Me too.
Okay.
I agree.
So I have to say, I mentioned my concern. I found some empty vape cartridges in your room. Did you know that I found them?
Well, what the heck are you doing with empty vape cartridges in my room?
Oh, okay. So what we could have done here, right? Just time out for a second. What we could have done here is if I was confrontational, right? I would say, why the hell do you have empty vape cartridges in your room? What the hell are you thinking? Um, right. And the child, and so what do you think, Soraya? Let's say I came at you with like the confrontational, what the hell are you doing with vape cartridges in your room?
Right. Well, I figured, I just throw them away. They were there and I just threw them away.
Right.
Not a big deal.
And if I came at you confrontationally, right, that would probably increase your defensiveness,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
You might say,
Absolutely.
like, I can't believe you went looking through my room, or whatever.
So
Uh,
much for the trust. I hate you. I can't believe it.
totally, totally.
That's my space, the
Yep,
child getting defensive like that.
exactly, exactly. Um, so yeah, it's really, so the goal, right? When we talk about the goal of this conversation, right? The goal right? The goal doesn't necessarily have to be, I need my kid to stop vaping. The goal needs to be, I need them to enter into a dialogue with me where they're open to talking about it, right? That's the first step. And that openness will be cultivated, is something that we can cultivate in order to increase the motivation, right? So what we're doing through this initial conversation is really looking to just open up the door, set up that safe space, right? So getting back to it, like I said, the most important thing, Soraya, is that you're honest with me. You're not in trouble, right? Like I said, I'm just concerned. Have you been vaping?
Um, yeah.
Okay, all right. No, I get it. I get it. I am so proud of you for being honest with me. That I know it's tough. I know it's tough, but I'm telling you, it's just going to make things better going forward. So, and this is another open-ended question. tell me, what do you like about vaping? Like, how does it make you feel?
Well, when I'm with my friends, I don't feel like I'm a part of the group when they're vaping. When I do vape, I feel a lot less nervous. I feel relaxed. I just don't feel as stressed in social situations. It makes me feel kind of good and calm.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me. I know it's, like I said, I know it's not easy to talk about it. And that is an example of an affirmation. So when you vape, you feel less nervous and more accepted by your friends. That's a reflection, right? That's me repeating back to her what she just shared with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And when you're around them and you don't vape, do you feel excluded?
Not exactly. I mean, I know that they will not say I cannot hang out with them, but I feel less accepted by them. I feel like I don't belong.
Mhm. And so just time out for a second. I could have one of the traps I could be falling into here if I do premature focusing or blaming, right? As you, oh well, that's not a good friend group for you, so you have to find a different friend group, um, and that will again close that conversation, right? So with what she said, I have to imagine that that feels so stressful, and I'm sorry that you felt that way. Is there anything else you can do when you're hanging out with your friends to like feel less nervous?
I don't know. Well, maybe if I brought Brandon with me, I always feel comfortable with him.
That's a great idea. What else do you do to help you when you feel nervous?
I have tried deep breathing and thinking about positive stuff. Sometimes that helps. Maybe just doodling with art or drawing. I like journaling and reading as well.
Cool, cool. Right, those are all ways in which that you can walk into that situation and feel better, and not necessarily be um tempted to engage in an unhealthy behavior just to so to help you feel better. So I totally get that. I totally get that. um yeah. Um so so bringing Brandon with you and trying positive affirmations and deep breathing may help you, right? In regards to and as well as art and journaling and things like that. Those are awesome. Those are awesome ways in which to manage those situations.
Yes, I think it could be helpful. Even maybe just listening to music. I need to listen to my music more because that keeps me calm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I really appreciate this time, Soraya. I really, really do. Like we said, it sounds like lacrosse is super duper important to you. You don't want vaping to get in the way of that. And you also want to feel accepted by your friends, totally. And that by bringing another friend and practicing some of those other skills that you talked about, sounds like it would be really helpful in those situations. Does that sound right?
I'll try that. Thank you.
All right. And so that, you notice how I kind of did the summary at the end. Um, so that's our role play. And I'm wondering, do we get the time stamp? 5-minute warning. There it is. Okay.
So, I
Beautiful.
mean, you have that. I think that, the biggest thing is a takeaway. I don't know if anyone wants to put anything on, if you have questions or follow ups. Um, John McAteer had great points of communication, engagement, empathy, open ended dialogue, and also, echoing what you're hearing from your child or the student, because it just affirms that there's that listening engagement and that the student or child is understanding that you understand them, right, John? In
Mhm.
that respect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The story I could tell about my daughter. She's a freshman in high school, and she got accepted to the JV lacrosse team, and they had an end of season party in which most of the girls were drinking. So I go to pick up my daughter, right? And my question to her, then the ride from this house to my house was maybe 15 minutes. I start off with the question, wow, it must have been really hard for you to be around all that alcohol and not drink. What was that like for you? And she had a muted response. So I was like, well, did you drink it all? Right? She goes, I had a few sips. And I cultivated what I call a compassionate curiosity. I just wanted to find out, what happened. By the end of the ride, she admitted to having two malt beverages, like the Mike's Hard Lemonade or whatever. Um, and she, there was, there wasn't really a punishment, but there was a lot of appreciation for her in being honest. And it was only because we didn't lose our minds that she felt as though she could be honest with us. And it also increased her autonomy, because guess what, she wasn't feeling well that night after drinking those, right? And when she had the flu, I'd be in there, I'd be rubbing her back and stuff like that. She didn't get any of that night, right? This is all you. This is
And it
all
was
you.
a safe place to share that. We did get some comments. So we heard one saying, "It's great to hear this as a realistic example." Another one saying, "Great job. Love the eye roll as a teenager." You see it a lot. I think we can all
Mhm.
agree on that. Another comment was, "What about the massive use of marijuana in vaping devices?
Yeah.
Big problem.
Mhm.
It is normal, quote unquote, in teens' eyes and quote unquote safe. Can you speak a little bit about this use of the devices?"
Absolutely. Absolutely. So very similar to the marijuana, the marijuana that's out presently. It is not the marijuana from years ago. These had all of the marijuana that's out, that's not distributed, or cultivated by the government. They are strains that have about 74 active chemicals in them, and are a lot stronger than the marijuana from years ago. So that's one thing. Um, the and aside from, and also tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana and in the oil for the vape devices, especially for kids that whose brains are actively developing, especially adolescents. They're going through, in regards to brain development, they're going through something called uh, synaptic pruning, right? Which means that all of these synapses that were open in their brain to expose them to all of these new and take in the world are slowly but surely being trimmed down and just being optimized to utilize whatever is they're used to doing, right? So this is when habits start, right? So that's why introduction of THC at this level, or at this age, this developmental age, is extremely detrimental. We find kids that engage with THC at this age are more likely to have focusing problems, attention deficit issues, anxiety, depression, things like that. So it is dangerous. And getting to the question about vaping THC specifically, um, so when I smoke a cigarette, right? I mean, I don't smoke cigarettes, but if I did smoke a cigarette, um, with every pull of the cigarette, I'm getting varying amounts of nicotine by each pull, because it's just distributed upon over the tobacco. When I vape nicotine, I'm getting the same percentage of nicotine with every pull, right? Which means that I become dependent upon it that much faster. Same thing happens with THC. That oil, right, is a concentrated level of THC in every pull. So that means that I think they say that one pod, or one pod of a vape is like, for in comparison to nicotine, one pod of nicotine vape is the same amount of nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes, right? So I would say that it's comparable with THC. Um, and yeah, and out, so they are getting a higher concentration of THC, which definitely leads to more proneness for addiction.
And on the heels of that, so another great job of for offering this session is the use of hookah considered vaping. Before you answer that, because I know our time's limited, any resources that would convince teens of what we're saying right now, because teens know more than we do. I'll give you the hookah one, but I was going to say I think it's so early, so important early on to share facts, evidence,
Yeah.
um, the science that's out there, the stories that are out there of kids losing maybe scholarships or consequences from, with college preparedness or what happened in school. Real fact evidence out there, and also schools and community, um, I guess, members can really be proactive by having workshops, webinars. One thing that was so effective at my daughter's schools, our PTA had a great show and tell. And so we brought the kids in, we had the parents in, and they got to learn about all the chemicals in it. And, they would use show and tell of like an aerosol spray can, or they would show all the vaping devices to the parents. And we were like mortified. Wow, they actually come in a pen, they come in a thumb drive. So getting the things that can connect with the kids, but also real life scenario cases. When you talk about the marijuana, it could be laced, and what happened to a kid that had a bad reaction that might have went into cardiac arrest or might have had an emergency transportation to the hospital. So there are, our platform PAVE has great resources. You talk about resources, great videos, great engagement with teens, and the younger groups to be able to advocate and talk about it. And so there's a lot of information out there. You can even email us at PAVE. But if you want to talk about the hookah, because there was a question about that, is hookah considered vaping?
I do have to interrupt John and let you know at 2:45 we're starting in the main room, so we are going to have to wrap.
No
Okay.
problem. No problem.
Oh, good wrap. Sorry about that. There are other questions. Also, what you do with adults who are vaping in the family and the kids see it, that
Yeah.
role model.
No. Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah. So we have to stop, right? Is that what we're being told?
I think so. So you can. I don't know if you want to put it in the chat.
I will just, let's let you finish these questions and
Okay.
go a couple more minutes. I just want to let people know so they're not missing. If they want to jump back onto the main line, it's in the chat. And there is stuff starting at 2:45. So please go ahead.
Thank you.
And we'll always keep this recording. So
Yeah. So to get to the hookah, hookah, right? So that's inhaling smoke through water, which cools the smoke. It's still bringing the. We have a pulmonologist that works with us in regards. That's a vaping expert, and he says the only thing that should be going into your lungs is air. And so anything other than that is detrimental. And you hear this all the time, is that vaping is harmless, right? I'm not burning paper and inhaling it into my lungs. I'm not doing that. But less harm does not mean harmless, right? So, that's the one thing that I really put out there. You are heating oil, right? When we heat oil in our kitchen, when we're cooking, it dissipates, right? It evaporates in our kitchen and it lands on our surfaces, and maybe we get that oily residue. Imagine that happening in your lungs, right? It coming back to a more stable temperature and resting in your lungs, right? That's what we're talking about, right? Because it's not just water vapor that we're inhaling. We're inhaling the oil, which may or may not have additives that are toxic when heated. But we also have what's called a vaporizer, which is a small coil that heats up in the vapes that erodes over time. So that means we're also inhaling nickel and chromium and things like that. So all of that is going into our lungs, right?
Last but not least, quick
Yeah.
on this one. How do you approach the family? Because I hear this a lot, and this is very prevalent even in our school community. How do you approach the family that has adult vapors and the youth saying, "Well, you do it, why can't I?" They're watching them do it. It's normalized behavior of the addiction, and so the teen thinks it's okay because the uncle, aunt, or even the parents are doing it.
Right. do as I say, don't do as I do, right? Is that what we're saying? So, it's important that we realize that we are models for our kids, right? And so if we do not want them to engage in those behaviors, we have to not display those behaviors in front of them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. John, you were awesome. I want to do a workshop with you at my daughter's school.
Let's do it. Thank you,
Yes,
Soraya.
thanks, everyone. We appreciate you. Keep being advocates for kids out there and the youth, and keep doing what you do. We hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you, everybody.